Welcome back to the channel, Boils and Ghouls. Today we dive into the chilling story of Zak Bagans and the infamous Demon House. Zak Bagans, renowned paranormal investigator, host of Ghost Adventures, purchased this house in Gary, Indiana after reports surface of demonic activity within its walls, residents claiming to have witnessed levitating children, mysterious footsteps, and even possessions. House gained notoriety after it was featured in Bagans' documentary, Demon House, which chronicles his investigation into the terrifying occurrences. But what happens when you do a deeper dive into the case of the Demon House? What other things could be uncovered? Was this real? Was this all fake? Sadly, the horrific truth about that house is far sadder than anything that Zak Bagans could make up. So, before we get to the Demon House, Zak Bagans, who is he? Zak Bagans was born on April 5th, 1977, Washington, D.C. in the United States. Raised in Glen Ellen, Illinois, and he graduated from Glenbard West High School. In 2004, Bagans teamed up with Nick Groff and Aaron Goodwin to produce a documentary-style film called Ghost Adventures. The film then aired on the Sci-Fi Channel in 2007. So Ghost Adventures is an American paranormal reality television series that premiered on October the 17th, 2008 on the Travel Channel before moving to Discovery Plus in 2021. The program originally followed Zak Bagans, Aaron Goodwin, and Nick Groff on their ghost adventures where they would get locked down inside of a building. But over the years, a lot has changed. Nick Groff disappeared from the show, and there's a whole host of things to delve into what caused that, and that'll be done in a separate video. Now, Zak is joined by Bill Toley and Jay Wasley, and they investigate locations that are reported to be haunted. So this isn't a debunk. This is something else entirely. I initially watched this because I assumed this documentary would be more like Ghost Adventures, and I could debunk the equipment and things. And there is going to be some of that in this video. I initially intended this video to be shot like one of the Sam and Colby videos I've made, with multiple camera angles as we sat upstairs in that comfy chair, and this documentary has completely angered me and taken me out. I mean, it's not a documentary. It's not. And if it is the worst documentary I've ever seen. So, I watched The Demon House. Well, not only is it boring and over-dramatized, but it's actually really, really insulting. Specifically, poor neighborhoods, poor areas, and poor families. But it's insulting to the viewers as well. Zak Bagans, he seems to have no self-awareness at all. And his ego, particularly in this documentary/movie, it's out of control. You see, most viewers watching Ghost Adventures, I assume they watch the show knowing that Zak is a fraud. And I assume they watch the show as a guilty pleasure, or as a, what's this? This is fun. My impressions of Zak have never been great. I don't think the man has any integrity as a paranormal investigator. He's a ghost hunting show frontman. I don't think he cares about the paranormal in the way he says. He cares about the paranormal dollar. And what this documentary does is takes the showman out of Zak, peels back the layers a little bit, and shows the real person behind him, which, wow. What an ego. What a control freak. What a horrible guy. This documentary has just pushed any sort of feelings that I had on Zak, being, at least he's entertaining, at least he's funny. I was just pushed it into, I can't stand this guy. So the documentary actually opens with a warning. The following documentary may not be suitable for all audiences. This film shows real people, places, and events involving alleged demonic possession. Demonologists believe that demons can attach themselves to you through other people, objects, and electronic devices. View at your own risk. Where do we start on that absolute mess of a statement at the beginning? That disclaimer. Demons via digital media are dangerous. And even worse, Zak even goes on to claim that this movie is cursed. Is it? Alright, because I had to watch it twice. The first time was with the express intention of making this video. And when I got to the end of my note-taking, you know what I'd written? Zak's a dickhead. That was it. So then I had to do it again. And it was even more painful the second time round. But go back to this little written piece at the beginning. What a joke. Do you know how many hours of haunted footage I consume weekly for debunking, for enjoyment? Do you know how many photographs of Robert the Doll I have looked directly at? Do you know how many videos of Robert the Doll I have looked directly at? The rumour is, if you look at a photo or a video of Robert the Doll, you die. I've seen loads of him. How many demonic videos I've watched where they say a demon can attack you or attach to you through this video? Loads. Do you know how many times it's happened? None. Do you know how many millions of people watch those videos and how many of them have actually had an attachment? None. Do you know how many people have actually died from a paranormal experience? None recorded. Do you know how many people have died from demonic possession? None recorded. A few have died from exorcism attempts though, and that'll play into this a little bit later. Nobody died. Somebody was at risk of it. When you add to this documentary, if you watch this, you could get a demonic attachment. I have been in a number of locations in the last couple of years, rumoured to house demonic activity, and I have shit-talked for hours on end demons. I've gone at it. Come on, poke me, take me over, throw something, hurt me, kill me, do whatever you want. I call out for hours and hours. I provoke demons, and then I try to speak to spirits. Nothing ever talks back, but demons are also powerful. Why do they seem to be scared of human beings and don't want to show up? Absolute bullshit. In fact, all I've got for my troubles is a bit of black mold up my nose. Suffering from lack of sleep from the travelling, and the realisation that all of these reports of demons attacking people through media are a load of shit. So this documentary proper kicks off with how Zak found the house through news reports of exorcisms and possessions. Spooky stuff. Zak kind of makes out in this documentary for a while that this family move out, Zak buys the house. Very little time in between. Yet there are reports of squatters in there, and I think even Zak mentioned squatters at one point. What he fails to mention is, after Latoya's family moves out, another family moves in. And do you know what that family claim happened in that house, paranormal-wise? Nothing. Nothing ever happened. In fact, the wife of that family states nothing paranormal has ever happened in this house. The only thing is the paranormal enthusiasts keep turning up and pestering us. And that's why they moved out. Well, that was the story. Until Zak Bagans turns up, a pocket full of cash. And Zak offers the husband money, because, you know, if you're going to try and buy somebody off, buy the bloke. We have less moral values than women. And a deal was struck. And suddenly, there was paranormal activity. Ooh. It's almost like the money conjured up a demon. And the father of this family, the alpha male, he tries to highball Zak. And he's like, yeah, movie studios want in on this action. So, and you're offering me peanuts, so you're going to have to pay me more. And Zak does. And this is really important to note about this documentary, about this house, about this history and everyone involved in it. Whoever owns the house owns the rights to the movie. Because movie studios have been trying to make this Demon House movie for years. Whoever owns the building owns the rights to the story to sell to the movie studios. So Zak buys the house, ensuring that he owns those movie rights. And then he can make a documentary. A couple, you know, this latest family that I barely mentioned is quite confusing. They move out, but their pockets a bit fuller. Zak is free to make his own movie about the house, or to sell the rights to a movie, whatever he wants to do. But now he has the house, Zak has to find the original occupants. He has to find the original people from the story. He has to find Latoya and Latoya's family. You know, the ones that claimed that they were actually under a demonic attack, because nobody else claimed that. And how does Zak find Latoya, the tenant terrorized by a demon. He goes in full scumbag mode. He finds a news report on the family that has nothing to do with the paranormal, the demon house, or anything demonic, nothing along those lines, and notes the address from the video footage. So Zak and his massive ego drive to this lady's house, invading all the privacy they can to get there. Knock on the door. No letters, no phone calls, no emails, no representatives of Zak Bagans, no representative of Ghost Adventures, nothing. Just turns up at this lady's house that, by all accounts, has gone through hell, whether that be mental health or other things that I'll get to later. What a guy. Zak drives all the way there, knocks the door, and Latoya refuses to speak to him. Why does she refuse to speak to him? Well, if you listen to Zak Bagans, she refuses to speak to him because he's been in the house and something may be attached to him. Or at least that's the narrative Zak is spinning. It could be legitimate, but the truth is a far more simple explanation. You see, Latoya has already spoken to a movie studio about her story at the house. And in with speaking to a movie studio about her story in the house, she is not allowed to speak to competitors. Zak Bagans bought the house and wanted to make a movie or a documentary. He is a competitor. That's why she doesn't speak to him. Which brings us full circle. Why did Zak buy the house? To own the rights to the movie, to sell the rights to the movie, or to make a movie himself. Even with owning the house, he cannot tell Latoya's story because that is owned by her and whichever movie studio she sells that to. Zak can only tell the house stories. He can't tell Latoya's stories, and that may be a bit of a problem, and that may well be why this documentary goes so far off the rails at the end. It made me angry. But good old Bagans, you don't mess about. No. Good old Bagans approaches Latoya's brother. Now, bearing in mind, this neighborhood in America, in Indiana, is a very, very poor neighborhood. People are living on the breadline or worse. The houses are shit. They're in a state. Nobody's got any money. These are poor people. So he approaches Latoya's brother, and I don't see any money change hands, so I'll never say that money changed hands, but suddenly he starts speaking to Zak Bagans, and he tells us two stories, and those two stories involve the kids. One of the stories is that the child was speaking in tongues. We don't get what tongues he was speaking in, what language, nothing paraphrased, no even dialect, nothing. No language, doesn't even tell us if it's Latin, if it's something else, nothing. Just whimsically passed by Bagans and crew. And the second one is the kid getting violent with his siblings. And at one point, his grandmother. So many times I beat my brother up, my brother beat me up. Thousands. No demons involved. We just didn't like each other as kids. Some kids have issues. Some kids, it's specifically with no money in a poor area, are going to have some issues. And those issues ain't a demon. But again, we have to remind ourselves of the star power of Zak Bagans. Why would the brother betray his sister? Zak Bagans is a very famous man. Making a documentary, there's cameras everywhere. Ooh, I could be on TV. Ooh, I could be in a movie. Or even, ooh, Zak's just put $1,000 in my pocket and I ain't got no money. I can give this to my sister when she's less pissed at me. So how do we know that the brother hasn't embellished these stories to, feature in a Zak Bagans documentary? And then the documentary takes a turn. And this is where I start to get really riled up by it. One of the children of Latoya was being visited by Child Protection Services. And this Child Protection Services agent sees the child walking backwards up a wall. Incredible. Her first-hand account. Not only is there her first-hand account, there is video footage of this. And Zak is in possession of this footage, but he never shows it. We get a over-dramatized version of the event. It's a cinematic. And the description of the event a little later is, whilst holding his grandmother's wrist, the child walked up the wall. The child was having some sort of meltdown, some temper tantrum, holding his grandmother's wrists, arguing with his grandmother, and pushed himself up the wall. That's why Zak didn't show the original footage. He would have showed a kid having a tantrum, his nan trying to calm him down, and then he just walks up the wall. Kids are incredible. The things I used to do when I was a younger person, you know what I mean? We used to go to school, we had quite a slim corridor into a business studies room. And me and my mate Pricey would sit on the wall. Like, we would wedge our feet on either wall, and we'd be 8 or 9 foot up in the air. And people would be queuing up to go into class, and we'd drop stuff on them to scare them, and then they'd look up and laugh at these 2 skinny kids, almost 8 foot, just seemingly hovering in the air. It was just our feet and a bit of leverage. You have to question, why were child services there? Were the child services there because of a demonic possession or something much more real? And we'll work our way back around to this in a little while. And the lady from the Child Protection Services, even she is an issue in this documentary. They claim that this CPS woman, doctors, nurses, police, and family members witnessed this child walk backwards up the wall. This Child Protective Services lady saw this event. We don't get any other input other than the grandmother and this CPS worker. And how does the CPS worker deal with what has just unfolded in front of her? She walked out of the house. She, as a Child Protective Services worker, in her own description, saw a child Exorcist style walk backwards up a wall. And how does she protect the child? She just walks out. Not enough. How does she protect this child that's in danger of either neglect or demons? She walks out. Great job. I can't remember the lady's name. You'll have seen images of her while I'm reading the story out. You need a different job. You suck. You suck at being a child support worker, a child protection officer. You suck. So Zak then interviews this Child Protection Services worker. This online, he's on his laptop talking to her. He conducts an interview, and Zak brushes past a lot of the really weird things that don't make sense about this entire walking up the wall thing. And he also brushes past the fact that the CPS worker states that she saw signs of these kids being beaten and burnt. And she didn't mean by anything demonic. You know where I'm going. And I have to be careful what I say because of YouTube terms of service. But yeah, and Zak brushes that past to get straight back to the walking up the wall. Next we meet the police chief and his lieutenant. Ooh, this is going to be credible. The police chief tells some tales of slimy stuff on the blinds in a house that's full of mold. And a door that moved every now and again when nobody was near it. If you're waiting for more, that's kind of it from him. But then the lieutenant... I watch this guy. If you watch this documentary, watch this guy. He seems about as credible as Lee from Really Haunted. So he gives an account of digging dirt in the basement floor, looking for... Why are they digging up the basement floor? No idea. But they find a pink nail, a false nail. They find some panties. And Zak has to go, ooh, panties. It's a bit weird. And then Zak lists the other items found. The police officer doesn't. Zak does. A metal bar, a sock, and a red tin. And then Zak, in his full dramatic voice, says, who buried these items? And why? Zak, that is junk. Buried in dirt in a dirt basement. This isn't concrete. It's a dirt basement in a house that's a few years old. There's had kids in it. Kids bury shit. I used to bury shit. Dogs bury shit. But yeah, this lieutenant, the police officer, just watches interviews and he just comes across as absolutely full of it. And again, ooh, Bagans is rich. I can get on TV. Let's go. And then we meet another family. Who are these? These are the previous tenants. 3 kids. And they're excited to be doing a ghost hunt with Zak at this house. Ah, woo. They're not scared. They're excited to be at this house that's reportedly infested with 200 demons. I forgot that. 200 demons. So Zak, clearly looking miffed, proceeds to scare the shit out of the 3 kids with stories of attachments and this ain't fun, this ain't games, and spooky wookies. Good job, Zak. You can't have these kids running around not scared. It'd ruin your movie. And then this gets real dark. One of the kids, a boy, leaves the house. He leaves the house. He stood outside by his car. Zak ponders by a window in a really shit shot and says, why is he leaving? Because you just scared him, you idiot. They've gone there expecting a laugh, and you got all grumpy, and this is nothing to be laughed at. You could be attacked. This could attach to you. No wonder he left. I'd have left, and I'm a grown-ass man. And then we get into the real dark stuff. The stuff that really, really started to boil my blood watching this. 2 days after this family visits the house, the young daughter attempts to unalive herself. Zak, of course, claims this to be something paranormal. The girl tried to injure her mother and then in turn injured herself by stabbing herself in the wrists repeatedly with a pen. And Zak Bagans, with all the care and all the concern, Jeffrey Dahmer tries to push the narrative that this could be stigmata. It's so tasteless. It's unreal. It's so tasteless that at this point in this crap documentary, I'm angry. And let's not take this lightly because I've made some jokes in the build-up to getting to this point. This young girl tried to end it all 2 days after meeting Zak Bagans. I'm not saying it's Zak's fault, but he claims that... Let's not take this lightly. A teenage girl has tried to take her own life. She has tried to end it all, and Zak wants to link that to some form of stigmata linked to a demon. This is beyond distasteful. This is disgraceful. We don't know the kid's backgrounds. We don't know her issues, whether it's mental health, whether it is the house, whether it is Zak. We don't know. And then we see an exorcism on her. And wow, it's in bad taste given what we have just seen. This kid needs a doctor. She needs some help. From a doctor, from a practitioner, from a mental health expert, or a priest. And she certainly doesn't need to have an exorcism filmed for a Zak Bagans ego stroke. And while we're talking about an exorcism, and while we're talking about exorcists, the exorcist is Father Michael Magino. In the documentary, they claimed he's performed multiple exorcisms of the family and the house. Yet the Diocese of Gary, which is the state in Indiana in which this house is, state Reverend Michael Magino is not authorized to perform exorcisms. Ooh. What the hell is he doing with this young girl? This young girl who is in danger from herself. And in danger from the guy at the beginning of this documentary who claimed, I am the world's leading researcher on ghosts and demonology. This film is cursed. And this is what she's got to deal with. And it turns out that the issue with the daughter was more linked to issues between her and her mum. And that's something that has happened again in this house. What is claimed to be demonic is in fact poor families going through rough times and parents not being able to deal with having children. So the scene changes and we move on from all this trauma to an expert in celebrity hauntings, Barry Tapp, who uses all the usual gadgets and gizmos that feature in Ghost Adventures and other shows. This is where I hand over to Kenny Biddle to discuss some of the objects that this show in particular uses and why they're a load of shit.
Hey there, beardos, weirdos. You have no idea how many times I tried that before I actually said it right. So I'm here because Beardo asked me to do a little segment, which is probably going to be a big segment, but a little segment on ghost hunting gadgets. Some of the ones that are in common use, and I wanted to give my take on it. You know, like things like why I don't like using them, why I think the results aren't trustworthy or valid, and then maybe just some issues to make you think about the next time you use them, or maybe don't use them. Who knows? But let's jump in. So the first item is EMF meters. Like these! Electromagnetic field meters. These meters measure the strength of a field that surrounds like an electrical wire or appliances when they're on, when they're operating, or even magnets. Because, part of it is magnetic field. These meters come in two different types. There's single axis and tri-axis. And you're probably familiar with the tri-field meter, which is one of the more expensive, but reliable meters because they read the field strength from all three axes. So all three axes means there's an X, Y, and Z. You actually have to rotate something different axes like this in order to get an average reading, a good reading. The most common EMF meters that are in use are like K2, the Lutron, the Mel meter, stuff like that. These are all single axis meters, which means that you have to rotate them. You actually have to manually rotate them on all three axes in order to get a proper reading. For a demonstration, I have this thing. So I made this years ago. I put some metal rods in there, and this represents all three axes that you have to spin it on. So when you turn this on, you'd have to spin it this way, and this way. In every point, or different points in each room, in order to get a good idea of the average reading in that room. You want to record the low, the high, and then the average to see what's going on in that area. And again, you have to do it in multiple locations in one room and in multiple rooms. So that's a lot. And that's only for that time too. So one of my pet peeves here is that these are done like in base readings. These are usually used for base readings in the beginning. People spend like 20 minutes to a half hour. They walk through the house. They basically have it in front of them. They walk in one side, they go around, they come out the other side, and they think they have a base reading for that room, which is not true. You're not taking into account anything that might cycle on and off. If you turn on the lights in the room, if you turn the lights out, you're going to have a different reading. If there is something like on the other side of the wall, like a refrigerator or a freezer, or maybe something below you, like a heater or air conditioning unit that might cycle on and off throughout the day, you're going to have different readings. Plus, power usage and the people that are involved and the seasons all have an effect on the different readings. So in order to get base readings, you would actually have to be in a place for at least a year, monitoring several sections in different rooms, in every room, all year long, and take basically multiple readings every second in order to get a proper baseline reading of the entire environment. Also consider that the house that you're in, or the building that you're in, if you're like an office building or a museum or something like that, they still have power going to it. So you have power coming in at 50 to 60 hertz, which is usual mains for like the UK, the US, and everywhere else around the world. But that system is set at 50 to 60 hertz. But it can be manipulated by like things like what I mentioned before, like the freezer, a refrigerator, a heating or air conditioning unit, some kind of generator in the basement. These can put a surge into the system or a draw, because if one of these devices goes on and it's a big power draw, like a refrigerator, big power draw. So that might see a dip in the system, which you would read as a dip in the reading of the field, because the field would get weaker because there's less power going through. But also, when these devices turn off, or if there is a surge in the system, you'll get a spike. And that's why it's good to know, like, all right, what's going on? What might be cycling on and off throughout the day or throughout the few hours that I'm there? Another concern is when you have intersecting fields. So if you have an appliance on one side of the hallway and another appliance on the other side of the hallway, and they are both putting out pretty strong fields, and you're walking down the middle, you're not going to get an accurate reading. You're going to get an average of both, or it might be a lower reading than if just one was on, which is kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of weird. I've tested it a few times where I've put two devices on and the reading has gone down. So I don't know what's going on. I have to look into it more, but this is something to consider when you're walking around with a meter. And even when you're doing ghost hunts, when people are doing their ghost hunts and they set up a K2 meter by itself and they're asking it questions, if you don't know what cycles on and off, you could ask like, hey, is anybody here? And then a freezer in the next room or in the basement could cycle on, and it'll create a field or a stronger field, and then that light will light up, like it'll go up 2 or 3 lights on the K2 meter or something like that, and you think you have a ghost when it's not. That's why it's so important to know everything that's going on. You need to know the environment that you're in. All right, next up is the SLS camera. So this was a game addition or like accessory that was made so that instead of the player sitting on the couch playing with a controller, they got up and became the controller. So they could move around. They could act out all the, like a lightsaber battle, or they could do a dance routine or sports or whatever. They could do these things and they become the controller. So the Kinect operates because it sends out infrared light. So it has an emitter. It sends out infrared light either with the speckle pattern, which was used in the first version, or it has 3 lights that flood the environment with infrared light. And then it also combines that with the ambient infrared light to create a map of the area. Both versions also have a depth sensor, which looks at the infrared light. It measures the time of flight so when the infrared light leaves the emitter and then hits the object and comes back to the camera, it measures that, and that determines how far away an object is. It can also see around curves. It can see edges. So it's pretty good. I mean, the first version, the second version, a little bit better. However, both are not perfect. They make mistakes. So they have a database which has thousands of different shapes and sizes of people, from little kids to big adults. And it looks for that. It looks for shapes in the environment to match up to what it has in its database and says, okay, I think this is a player. I'm going to assign a stick figure. The problem is that the Kinect is supposed to be stationary. It needs to be stationary. And you hardly ever see that happen. Most of the time we see people, ghost hunters, using it with a handle and a tablet, and they're walking around the environment. So from the Kinect's perspective, since it's supposed to be stationary, if it's moving around like that, it sees everything as moving. The environment is moving, not the Kinect. Again, to the Kinect's perspective. That way, anything that comes in that remotely looks like a person will be interpreted as a person, a player, and it'll get a stick figure. Even when you have it stationary, or you're moving around a little bit, there is potential for inanimate objects to look like people. Chairs, book bags, ceiling fans, archways. I've had a trash bag, like a big hefty trash bag that was filled with trash, that was mistaken as a person because the Kinect put a stick figure on it. But in these cases, the stick figures are anchored to that spot, and that's something to look for. If it's anchored and it's not moving anywhere, it's just like, doing its freaky little dance, but not moving from that area, like not getting up and walking around like that YouTube channel Really Haunted. That's bullshit. The anchoring is a red flag. It tells you that the Kinect is making a mistake. So for the stick figures that walk around and do stuff like that channel, that Really Haunted channel, like that's just an overlay. He's filming. I have a whole video on that where I recreate it and show you, like, you can actually film yourself with the Kinect, and you turn the sensitivity all the way up, so there's nothing but a white background, like everything is washed out, but it still sees you as a stick figure, and then you can do whatever you want. And then when you overlay that onto other footage, you can chroma key out the white, and it disappears. It just leaves the stick figure, and you can basically just script out what you want to do, and it looks good. So hopefully I showed the little clip here, and you can see, like, I have a stick figure, which is me, but you don't see me. I knock off this doll off the table, and that's how easy it is. There's also something really important that I think most people miss when they're dealing with the Kinect. I did explain that it uses infrared light. It uses infrared light to see the environment, and it only assigns a stick figure to something that's reflecting that infrared light back at the camera, and the camera sees it, or the software sees it, as a figure. So if there is a stick figure in the environment, and you think it's a ghost, you think it's a demon, then here's something to think about. Your camera, like the webcam, your phone camera, all of these also see infrared light. And if you point your camera at the Kinect, you'll see the emitter. You'll see the emitter, throwing out infrared light. So if there really was an entity somewhere in that room that was making this stick figure, you would be able to see it on your camera. Like, here's an example. This is a remote control. Your camera can see the infrared light. You see it? See it? See it? So if there's a little demon running around and it's like, rah, 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 you should be able to see the shape of that in your camera. So because you can, guess what? There's no ghost. There's no demon. There's nothing there. It's the Kinect making a mistake. There you go. One more thing to put in there is that the Kinect also has to compensate for people that turn sideways. So when you're facing the camera, you can see 2 arms, and when I'm standing up, 2 legs, not a big deal. But when a player is doing like dance moves or like a lightsaber fight, then oftentimes they will turn sideways. And that means that one arm disappears, a leg disappears because it's behind the other one. And the software has to compensate for that. So keep that in mind. It's not just looking for a person with a head, a body, 2 arms, 2 legs. It's looking for some kind of shape of somebody that's turned sideways too. That's why all these other objects, like the side of a chair, the side of a couch, a wall, like a dividing wall between 2 rooms, will be mistaken for a person. The last thing I'm going to say about the Kinect is that the instructions are clear. It has to be put on a stable surface. If you're holding it and walking it around like on a handle, you're doing it wrong. You already invalidated anything that camera picks up. So it has to be on a stationary surface. The next item is a EM pump, electromagnetic pump. These devices are a scam. Basically, they're a scam. Don't spend your money on them. Please do not waste any money on these. So basically, the idea that I've heard is that these are little devices like this one and this one that create an EM field in the environment, because the idea is that it feeds the ghost. I mean, this one actually says energy for ghosts on it. So basically, they're saying that if you turn these on, it supplies enough energy to the ghosts in order to do what they do so well. You know, like move shit off of shelves and manifest into like an apparition or a shadow or do some crazy shit like that. The problem is these things put out a very, very weak kind of field. So if you put your EMF detector up here like this, I put it behind it, I turn it on, yeah, it's going to read it. Look, it topped it off. So this tops out at 200 milligauss. So yeah, it looks like it, but if you come off of it about a foot, you can see how quickly it goes down. And that's one of the things about EMF. It drops significantly the further you get away from the source. All right, so I mean, you just a foot away, and it dropped almost completely off. So that's a big deal. However, like you can get yourself a tabletop fan, which will do a much stronger field. All right, so if you really want to create an electromagnetic field because you think it's going to do something, then you can go to the store and pick up one of these. This is a fan that I picked up. Actually, I mean, brand new, these things go for about $30 here in the US, but I picked it up at a flea market for $1. Yeah, that's right, $1. So if I have my EMF meter here and turn it on, it tops out. It's still going stronger. It's still a lot stronger than when I had the other thing on. So this pump, and I got it right next to my head. That's how you become a supervillain. So the point is, you don't have to spend a whole bunch of money, because some of these things cost like, they cost like $100 or around that. And when you open them up, there's not much to it. To be honest, this one over here, I added because it had 2 of these. And what this is a little toy electric motor. That is it. That's a little motor for an electric car. And then up here, this is a magnet that's hot glued onto it. And when I had the other one here, the other one was over here. I took it apart just to see what all the pieces were, and then I recreated it so that I had 2. But this and this, same thing. This has the same kind of motor in it with a different kind of magnet. That's all it is, and it just spins it around. So I think it altogether, like one of these cost you about $10 to make, but they're being sold for like $60 to $100, and it's not worth it. It's really not worth it. Just go out and buy a fan, or any box fan, any kind of fan, electrical fan will do. I mean, if you really want to do it. But to be honest, the bottom line is there is absolutely no evidence to show that EMF has any effect on a ghost, or that a ghost creates EMF, or that it interacts with EMF, or that it uses EMF to do anything. There's just no evidence for it. So save your money. Another item I want to talk about is the DR60. Total piece of shit. Enough said. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Seriously though, the DR60 is a horrible thing. It's a horrible recorder. That's why it was discontinued. It was not discontinued because like Panasonic found out that it could detect ghosts or communicate with ghosts. No, there no such thing. It was discontinued because it was a piece of shit. That's why. And people were complaining. Consumers were complaining about it. But basically, I did a real deep dive into it. I have a video on the Center for Inquiry channel about the DR60, and I go through all kinds of testing. But the Cliff Notes version is that the recording quality of the DR60 was terrible. I mean, it was less than the old wired telephone systems that we had, at least here in the United States. I mean, it was really, really bad. It just simply cannot reproduce the human voice the way we hear it. The way you're hearing me now, it could not do that. And the software, the firmware that was in it with the components also had a habit of reinterpreting some sounds because it could not reproduce all the sound frequencies that we can hear or that we can speak and hear. It couldn't do it. So it would interpret them in a different way. It would actually make them different. It would manipulate the sound internally, and when it played it out onto that tiny cheap ass speaker, you're not hearing good sound quality whatsoever. It was not reproducing good sound quality. So with that, and also that it only had voice activation. So you couldn't just hit record and record continuously. You can't do that. It had to be voice activated. So you'd hit the record button and it had to wait until it heard a sound in order to start recording. So in many cases, it cut off the first part of a word or the first word that was being said. If there was a bang nearby, it would start the recording, but then there would be silence, and it couldn't handle that. It actually took the very, very subtle white noise of the silence that was going on and had to add sound. It's weird. Honestly, like I said, I did a whole deep dive into it, and I really get into more detail, much more than I can get into in this segment here. So I would advise you to, after you're done with Beardo's video here, hop on over to the Center for Inquiry website or YouTube channel and check it out because, like I said, it goes into much more detail. All right, one more thing before I go about the DR60, and that is getting the audio files onto your laptop or PC in order to analyze them and go through them. So this was not an easy process. It really wasn't, because the DR60 did not have a USB port, so you couldn't just plug a cable in like that and transfer the files. What you had to do was get onto your laptop or your PC, open some kind of recording software, and get it ready. Then you'd have to find an adapter for a 2.5 millimeter earphone jack. Because that's the size that was in the DR60. It wasn't the standard 3.5 millimeter. They went down a size to a 2.5 millimeter. So not everyone could get that or had that available to them. So basically, once you got the adapter, you plugged it in, you got another adapter to go to 3.5 millimeter or the larger jack, the larger audio jack, and then you plugged it into your microphone port on your laptop or PC. Then you hit record on your PC, you hit play on the DR60, and you had to wait. You had to wait until the entire audio file played out, and then you could stop it and edit. The issue comes in because not everyone had that 2.5 millimeter adapter. Therefore, what I saw back when these first came out, and this is not a DR60, this is a QR80, which is like the next version that came out. But basically back then and still today, what I see is people taking this, they are pressing play on this, and then they're using their phone right next to it, right next to the speaker, and hitting record. And that's how they're getting the file. They're recording this way by the shitty ass speaker that was in the DR60 going into the microphone of your phone. And what that does is it introduces more noise, more white noise, more ambient noise, because it's going from one source out into the air and going into a microphone source. So you have anything that's in the room, anything that's going on in the room will now contaminate that audio file. So Really, really bad idea. I see this happening all the time. You introduce so many other problems with this. So just stop doing it. Stop. You know what? Just stop using that device altogether. Just throw them in the trash. That's where they belong. Next up is the REM pod. I don't like this thing either. Basically, this is like a novelty device. It doesn't measure anything. It doesn't give you a readout, with an accurate measurement. So you don't know really what's going on, except that it lights up and it makes noise. Ugh, that's annoying. So basically, what this is, it's a junior theremin device. So you can get these on like eBay and Amazon. You can spend like $20, and if you have any kind of skill with soldering, you can have this complete and ready to go within a half hour. Not a big deal. And what happens is it acts like a capacitor. So a capacitor is an electronic device that stores electrical energy between two electrical conductors that have a little bit of distance between them. And basically, this antenna makes up one side of the capacitor, and your hand, when you put it near it, makes up the other side. The space in between is where it kind of stores this electrical energy. So when you're holding it, oh crap, and you start getting your hand close to it, it's storing a small amount of electrical energy, and as you get closer, it goes up. It stores a little bit more because it's easier. The closer the gap is, the smaller the gap is between your hand and the antenna, the more electrical energy you can store, and that translates that into a signal that translates that signal into noise, a super annoying noise. Basically, it's any conducting material. So if you get your hand close to it, yeah, it goes off. If I use something else like a tape measure, goes off. If I use a non-conducting material like this plastic casing, I can get much closer, but there's actually a filament inside of it, so I will make it go off, but it has to get close, like really close. I'm touching it. That's what's making it go off. However, there are other things that can make it go off from a distance. So you don't have to be in the same room with it. You don't have to be next to it. You don't have to be in the same room. You can be in a different room behind a wall. You can be a floor above or below and still make this thing go off with a two-way radio, which is pretty handy. I mean, if you key this up, it goes off. In most cases, it'll go off for a few seconds, usually about 7 seconds before it resets. And this happens almost all the time. There you go. And you can change the tone. But in certain situations, when you get some practice with it, you can actually make it go off with just chirps. It won't go off with the whole 7 seconds in a row and like a high-pitched thing. You can get it to chirp. So in other words, you can get it to answer questions from ghost hunters. Are there any ghosts here? Do 1 beep for yes, 2 beeps for no. Ooh, there must be a ghost. Are there any demons here? Are there any weirdos here? Okay. All right, so this device can be manipulated, which causes a problem, and we need to put better controls on it. If you want to use this, I'm strongly against it because I don't think it benefits anything. It's just a random anomaly generator. That's basically what it does. But if you really want to use this, then I suggest using a control. Put this in a Faraday box, like a well-built Faraday box, because that'll block out any of the radio frequencies from two-way radios like this. And therefore, that takes that variable out of the equation. And if it still goes off, then it's something interesting. Then we need to look into it further. But until you actually put controls on the use of such objects, the data that you collect is invalid. It's not useful. And when we see television shows, the television ghost hunting shows that are using this, and they usually zoom in real close to the REM pod, like that, and we don't get to see the surrounding area. We don't know where everyone is. We don't know what's going on. We don't know if there's an extra crew member like behind the camera or like behind a wall or hiding behind a chair or a couch or something like that. We don't know that because to be honest, I mean, a lot of these ghost hunting shows you can't trust because they're productions. I mean, they're made to entertain you, especially when we get into some of these YouTube channels that focus on going out and doing the ghost hunting thing, and like every episode, like tons of shit happens all the time. I mean, you have to suspect something might be going on here, and this is one way to do it. The last thing I'm going to comment on, cat balls. Cat balls. Cat balls suck monkey butt. So the cat ball is a novelty toy. It is made for pets. These are very cheap to make. I believe each one actually costs about 98 cents to produce and to sell. That's what they sell from the manufacturer that makes these ones. And basically when you take it apart, this is what you're left with. You're left with a little casing here. There's the on-off switch. The battery pack is underneath because it consists of 3 small batteries that are in there. And then you have the tilt sensor. That's what you're looking at right there. And that right there, the red plastic wrapped in the blue, that's your tilt sensor. So inside that, there's 2 little balls. I said balls. Here's one where I removed the blue plastic and the switch. But you can see right inside there, there's 2 little steel balls, and basically they need to just make contact between the 2 plates. So you have 2 metal plates here, so the balls have to just make contact inside those 2 metal plates that you see right there. And as long as they make contact, it lights up. So you just have to tilt it back and forth, and that's what's called a tilt sensor. So this is not an accelerometer, which is what actually measures vibration. This is not a vibration sensor. This is a toy. An accelerometer is probably the most common type of vibration sensor, and that actually takes it looks at the vibration or the acceleration of an object. That's usually a steel ball that's mounted to a spring, and it measures the acceleration of that ball at the end of the spring, and it translates that into an electrical signal, which translates that into a vibration measurement, and that's how you get a measurement of vibration or a detection of vibration. This does not do that. This is basically an electrical circuit with a loose connection. That's what it is. The 2 steel balls that are inside there are the loose connection. It's like the broken wire when you have a light that doesn't work all the time or it flickers. That's what this is. And basically the 2 steel balls have to make a connection between the 2 plates that they are housed in between. And once they do that, it completes the circuit and you have power to the lights, and it lights up, which attracts the attention of a cat. Not a ghost, a cat. Basically, there's 2 things that I'm aware of that will make this go off. If it's sitting at a specific angle where the tilt sensor is not just like here, but maybe it's right there, and the 2 balls are down at the bottom, and there's a little bit of vibration that just makes them pop, just a little bit, just a little pop out of place, just like a fraction of a hair. That's enough to break the connection and reconnect it, and thus again supply power to the lights and make it go off. And this can be really, really simple. If it's on a set of stairs, even next to other ones that might be tilted a different way, which won't allow such an easy event of the balls popping out of place, you could have a bunch of them on the stairs and only 1 or 2 go off and the other ones don't. I mean, this is not unusual. This is just the way it is, depending on the orientation of the tilt sensor. Another reason is low battery. The batteries in here are not that great. I mean, they're cheap and they don't last forever. So once they start losing power, you're going to start having power surges because it's trying to keep up with the demand for the specific voltage to light up the lights. And when it can't do that, you're going to have these surges, and that's going to make the lights light up too. And this is a common thing with similar devices that start losing power. They start being triggered like constantly, and that's going to be a problem. So bottom line, these cat balls are one of the most ridiculous ideas that has ever entered into the paranormal community. And it's a shame that people still use these and still consider these something of a legitimate tool, because it's just not. There's no control over it. You have no idea what's making it light up. And people still just make the assumption that it must be a ghost. No, it's not.
Thank you, Kenny Biddle. Go and check out Kenny Biddle's channel. There will be a link in the description below. So while this expert is walking around the house, trying to find proof of a demon, and for the most part struggling to get anything, that's where we see our first shadow figure in the documentary. Wow. That's the cameraman's hand. Let me get some bullshit expert that says he's worked for NASA. See, I don't know what that is, but it's definitely not the cameraman's hand. Yes, it is. And this is the same cameraman who later claims he feels ill and proceeds to run like a Scooby-Doo villain down into the basement. And about Adam, the cameraman, where did he come from? Ghost Adventures have their own crew. They've had them for years. Who's this Adam guy? Well, he's a friend of one of the guys that works for Zak, apparently. So, later at the hotel, Adam, this random cameraman, who turns out is not a random guy at all, gets possessed in the hotel and runs down the corridor, jumping off stuff and shouting, "The demon wants you, Zak. The demon wants you, Zak." Why would the demon possess Adam that nobody's heard of in order to tell Zak that I'm going to possess you? Cut out the middleman. Just possess Zak. I mean, Zak's been crawling around in these shitholes, antagonizing the dead for years. Possess Zak. Easy pickings. Nope. Adam. And then how does Zak react to this guy potentially being possessed by this demon house? Zak fires him. You're fired. Get out of here. It is unreal. Zak fires the guy for being possessed and passing on possessed messages. And to bolster why Zak fired this guy, he shows that this man has got tattooed later in life and is now evil. This alluded to that he may have some substance abuse issues, etc. I found Adam on IMDb. He's a horror movie actor. Nothing big, but he's not a cameraman. He's an actor specifically in the horror movie genre, in the types of movies that you've never heard of. And in fact, the tattooed images that Zak shows you, they don't appear to be real. Those tattoos may have been for a movie role. This guy, since the documentary, because I've tried to find it more about him, see if the tattoos are real, etc., has privated his Instagram, privated his Facebook, all sorts. And I can see why he hid himself away from the world. He was made out to be some sort of cartoon villain by Zak Bagans, and then fired for his troubles. Or was he just paid to act up until that point, and act fired? And then we get to the real scares. Zak locks himself in the house, alone. Oh, woo! Zak has 3 cameras in this house. 3. Look at the amount of equipment the Ghost Adventures has in their arsenal, at their disposal. He doesn't take in an EMF recorder, he doesn't take in a REM pod, he doesn't take in an SLS, he doesn't take in anything. No devices, no EVP recorders, nothing. He just takes 3 cameras. Dun dun dun! A shadow figure actually charges Zak on camera. Incredible! There's 3 cameras in this house. They must all have captured it. No. Zak hears something, drops his camera, runs. The camera that he's dropped is out of focus. And just as it's out of focus, that's when the demon runs past it. And we see some black pixelated mess pass in the background. The other 2 cameras, and they're all sort of triangulating in where they're looking, don't capture nothing. It's a joke. And how does this event change Zak Bagans? You know, he's screamed, he's thrown something at this demon, it charges at him. How does this change Zak on a personal level? How does this make Zak feel about the way he works? He claims he has to wear glasses now because the demon knocked him cross-eyed. I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at being cross-eyed. It's the demon knocked him cross-eyed. I'm not even taking the piss. They were Zak's accounts. The demon made him cross-eyed. And he has to wear glasses for the rest of his life. Now, I remember a little bit earlier I said there was, like, sticky substances on the blinds, black mold, etc. One of the side effects of black mold is dun 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 irritation to the eyes. Zak has been crawling around in mold-infested shitholes for 18 seasons. 4 years. But it must have been the shadow that was only caught on 1 camera that caused his eye problems. Not all of these years around mold and dust and dank places. Speaking of, they then bring in an expert. And guess what the expert finds within the home? Black mold and carbon monoxide leaks. And a whole host of other horrible, nasty things that you would find in a rundown home that have some pretty gnarly, nasty, unhealthy side effects, both on your mind, your lungs, and your heart. Black mold. Just look up the effect of exposure, long-term exposure to black mold, and the same for carbon monoxide, even in small traces. And then you wonder why everyone in this house is acting possessed. They have no money. They probably eat very little. Not much in the way of prospects in life. They've got mold. They've got carbon monoxide leaking through the place. And all of these things that people are claiming are demons are all easily attributed to carbon monoxide and black mold. So let's loop back around to the kids, who are already under the watchful eye of the Child Protection Services until she walked out when a kid walked up the wall backwards. Why were these kids under observation from the Child Protection Services? Was it a demon? Is that why they were involved? No. It was for truancy from school and bad behaviour. And then we hear from an expert in this documentary who states and concludes that the child has no psychological issues, but in conclusion, it was the influence of the mother's claims of paranormal experiences that drove the kids to their behaviour. This was all brought onto these by the mother. And this, of all of it, is where my problems are with this documentary. This is capitalization on the very, very real, the very, very dangerous, and the very, very sad, tragic lives that very real poor people live. And Zak tried to turn all of this tragedy and all of this sadness into some realistic-based demonic documentary to sell tickets and stoke his own ego. He's using their tragedies to sell demons. He uses the demons to push his narrative to bring him more money. And then he goes even further with it. His friend, the paranormal expert with all of the equipment, suffers an organ failure. Zak blames the house. The second Child Protective Services worker has a motorbike accident, breaks some bones. Zak blames the house. The home inspector nearly gets hit by lightning. Later in life develops cancer. Zak blames the house. This guy has been crawling around, inspecting homes for mold, asbestos, and all the other nasty stuff for years. But it was this one house on one visit that caused this guy to have these problems, according to Zak Bagans. And all this was within 30 days of visiting, apparently. But Zak doesn't just stop there. Do you remember the celebrity sort of medium couple that used to feature on Ghost Adventures quite a lot? I'm not going to use their names because it's disrespectful. I certainly don't want to mention his name because he was a piece of shit. Zak uses their death and holds the house accountable. If you don't know the story of that couple, the husband was domestically violent. There were reports of domestic violence for years. The wife left, husband couldn't take it, he killed her, and then he killed himself. Well, how does Zak link this to the house? Because they may have psychically tried to help him. But Zak's ignored some things. He's ignored the fact that they were actually separated at the time. They psychically reached out and then died because of the house. Not because a scumbag that beat his wife for years finally lost, so he killed her and then he took himself out as well. Great job, Zak. You blame a demon for your mate killing his wife. It wasn't a demon. It was a vile control freak of a man, not the demon house. So Zak uses all of this to keep this narrative of this demon house alive and well. And what does he do? He bulldozes the house, destroys the house. All these sad, tragic things all came from the house. He destroys it. But he keeps the stairs for his bullshit museum. I'll feature that bullshit museum in another episode if you guys want to see it. So did Zak destroy the house to protect people? Did Zak destroy the house because of the damage the house did? Or did he destroy the house to ensure that nobody else would ever own it, and then in turn own the rights to the documentary or the movie rights for that property? The most terrifying thing in this Demon House documentary is Zak Bagans himself. His overinflated ego. His willingness to use tragedy to make this documentary seem more legitimate and scary. And he somehow accidentally turned all of this into a farce made in bad taste that actually makes Ghost Adventures seem far less shit than it actually is. So guys, do let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of this. I know we've used a lot of Zak's footage and the Demon House documentary footage, but I've never really tackled something like this before. Let me know what you think of it. Do you want me to tackle the Zak Bagans Museum? I obviously won't be able to use as much footage as this because there's no documentaries, nobody's allowed to film or photograph in there. A lot of people ask me about Zak Bagans, and I've wanted to cover this guy for years and years and years, but it's really hard to get the copyright correct on YouTube without getting a copyright strike in regards to something owned by a TV network or movie media network. And I'm still taking a risk even putting this out, but I think it's worth it. So let me know, do you want to see more? Do you want to see more stuff on Zak Bagans? Because, you know, he is the biggest fraud in the paranormal. Much love to you all. Beardo out.